a PhD at UC Irvine. It's been a heck of a lot of fun talking to him because we actually talk shop and I can say things and he knows what I'm talking about. And it's really a lot of fun. This is one that he pointed out to me. This is from David Stewart in a recent discussion at the Texas Maya meetings, where he was just happening to mention that there are no Maya texts dealing with warfare prior to AD 200, 250. And then after that, we get it all the time. Gee, why? I wonder. You know, there is a really kind of odd convergence, and frankly, one I wasn't expecting to see. Next kind of thing that we're getting, militarily, we know that down in the area where the Book of Mormon would have taken place, around the time that that the closing events are occurring in the Book of Mormon, the people from Teotihuacan are coming down. They are bringing with them a new style of warfare. They change the rules. There are all kinds of indications that things are dramatically different when these Teotihuacanos come down. And then you look at the Book of Mormon text, and right at the same time that historical documents are talking about the Teotihuacanos coming down and changing the nature of warfare, we have Mormon, who is first of all complaining about the Gadiantans, and secondly complaining that the nature of warfare has changed, and complaining that it just isn't the way it used to be. So the Book of Mormon is one more time chronologically reflecting the same kinds of pressures that we know to have been occurring at that time period. To this point in time, we are still at one of those things where you look at it and you say, you know, how can this kind of a correlation happen by accident? How do you hit that many things? And that carefully. You know, somewhere along the line, we should have the chronology getting mixed up if we were in the wrong place. If we were in the Great Lakes region, this would have blown up a long time ago. If we were in Malaysia, it would blow up a long time ago at the time when we're looking for just the older populations. There are not populations and peoples in the right places at the right time in Malaysia. There's a real good reason why that doesn't work. Way past geography, the rest of the geopolitical situation doesn't work. But the Book of Mormon just keeps getting better, and you know, including things that I found out yesterday, make it look better than I'd seen. Another one's kind of fascinating, and I'll just mention it because it's not my research, but I find it absolutely amazing. People have really complained about the Book of Mormon because it's the wrong kind of document. You're talking about Christianity way too early. You know, there's just all kinds of things that are supposed to be wrong against an Israelite background. The problem is they're wrong against an Israelite background only if you don't, you know, pre-compare Israelite or exilic Israel. The more that Israelite religion is being reconstructed prior to the time that Lehi took off, the more the Book of Mormon's theology and the things that it's concerned with fit right in. It's not nearly as problematic as they thought. What's wrong are the expectations that were brought to the text, not the text itself. Let's see, skip those. That one's not even interesting. The second one on here is one I tossed in for the sheer heck of it. You know, there are things that people will say about the Book of Mormon. They say, you know, they got this wrong. This is wrong. You shouldn't do it this way. And the problem is, you really don't want and should not find an historical text that is perfect according to our modern perceptions of what a history ought to be. The Book of Mormon should not look like a modern history. If it does, it's a forgery. It should look like an ancient text. That's where it came from. In ancient texts, there are lots of things that people get wrong, and the Book of Mormon happens to get a whole bunch of things wrong. For instance, it uses insider-outsider terminology. It tends to say, as most people do when they're first creating their societies, you know, there is us and them. There's this big wall around us, and anybody who isn't us is them, and we don't like them. And by golly, that's exactly right. It's wrong for modern history, but it's exactly right for ancient history. Mormon makes a mistake when he's talking about some of the historical conditions in Teotihuacan 250 years earlier. Well, is that wrong? For an ancient historian, no, actually it's exactly right. He should not have known what happened in a city that's that far away 250 years earlier. What he should have done is what he did, which is assume that what he knew about the city at that time had always existed. That's the way people thought at that point in time. So oddly enough, in a lot of cases, some of the things that the Book of Mormon gets wrong from an anthropological standpoint, it's getting exactly right. Economic stuff, not interested in that. Kinship. This is actually really important stuff. I'm not going to bore you to death with it, but this is actually very important. The kinship structure inside the Book of Mormon and the way kin function in the Book of Mormon matches a kin-based society. By the time of Joseph Smith, we had lost a lot of that, and certainly by our time, we've lost even more of it. But the Book of Mormon tends to operate like a kin society would have, which again is something that it ought to do. Contrary to what our expectation would be from somebody who's writing in the 1830s. Political. Boy, we could spend a lot of time on that. I'm looking at the time and I want to spend it on something else. So I'll skip this one as well. Other than to say in general, one of the things that people will say about the Book of Mormon is that, you know, it's got to be modern because it talks about voting. The voice of the people has to be a vote. Anybody who has said that has not examined the texts on the voice of the people. Anybody who thinks that the Book of Mormon is a democracy and that the Book of Mormon promotes democracy has not studied it. It does not. It's a very complicated system. I am sure that somewhere in the world there is another system that's just like that, but the only one I happen to know of is in the Maya world, where down at the bottom here, in the Popolna, or the community house where the elders gather together to hear the cases and discuss them. The voice of the people being literally, and if you read one of the sections in the Book of Mormon where it's talking about it, you can actually see in your mind's eye these people just talking. And somewhere in talking it out, changing their minds and coming to whatever the consensus opinion is. It has nothing to do with votes. The political system in the Book of Mormon simply doesn't look modern at all. What it does look like is the things that I've seen in Mesoamerica. Warfare, fascinating one that again I'm going to skim over. What's fascinating about this is that not only does he mention certain weapons, but the Book of Mormon is very accurate in the way those weapons are used in an attack. I'm not a military man, but you know, there's a certain way that you would do things, and I've consulted with a couple of military men. You know, the Book of Mormon actually makes military sense. You know, people who do war for a living can look at the text and say, you know, they're doing the right kinds of things with the right weapons the right way. None of these are the way war was fought when Joseph Smith was thinking of things, and the tactics are entirely different. One of the ones that I found very fascinating, Ross Hasek has a book out called Aztec Warfare, and the longer I read that and the more I read the Book of Mormon, the more I start seeing the same tactics being used on several occasions. There are textual witnesses of the Aztecs doing some of the very same things that we have seen in the Book of Mormon. So obviously they're effective tactics. Don't know who came up with them, but it's kind of curious that that area of the world knew about them and used them, including hiding in foxholes, popping up and attacking your enemy as they come by. Productive convergences. This is where I'd like to kind of finish things up, because this is where it really gets interesting. If the text of the Book of Mormon is an authentic text, it should be written by someone who assumed that we knew as much about his world as he did. That's the way the ancient people tend to write. That's the way the biblical writers wrote. They simply assumed that they did not have to explain a lot of things to us because they assumed that we were part of the culture and that we would understand things. So the only things that you get told are the things that you need to know because you're supposed to know everything else. That works really well until the world has changed and we don't know everything else, and all of a sudden things become kind of confusing and they look strange. And you get these odd questions about the Book of Mormon text where it tells a story where in our hearts of faith we know that it's a darn good story, but as soon as we step back from the view of faith and we look at it kind of cold and calculated, it becomes a stupid story. I got two of them for you. One of them thanks to Larry Paulson. How do you lose a city? Zarahemla might not have been the biggest city around, and frankly should not have been. When they get to Zarahemla, they're actually very homesick for where they came from, probably because they've now gone to the backwater after coming out of a real nice place, which is probably why the people of Limhi want to go back and inherit that land. So they do. And they go down, and after a long period of time with King Noah and everybody else, they get dominated by the Lamanites. Things really aren't very good. And so they're hoping for Zarahemla to come help them out and somehow rescue them. So they send a party to go back to Zarahemla. And they can't find it. This is only a generation later. I'm not even that bad with directions.